Hey everyone, today just want to show you my very simple dropper based item elevator. And yeah, this thing is very simple. It is completely silent. As you can see, all the items end up here that I put in down here. And as you might be able to tell, it is quite simple. There's not a lot involved. And well, it's pretty straightforward. I will walk you through how to build it. But before that, I will go a little into the individual mechanics revolving around a dropper-based elevator, and I think it's a nice thing to understand those, because you might be able to modify it to your own likings, and just overall knowing about the mechanics is always good, and that's what I always try to do. I try to explain the stuff because, well, it's always good to know these things. So first, before anything, I will explain to you the basic idea of a dropper-based elevator. The basics of that is that droppers that have something in them are able to transfer the items that are inside of themselves into a container above them. It's basically like a hopper that works in any direction, but of course you have to power the dropper. And as you can see, that puts the item up. We just have a little observer clock right here. As you can see, all the items get shot up in there because they don't actually ever enter the entity form, you know, the dropped items. They just straight up get transferred like hoppers do. But yeah, that is the basic idea of these dropper elevators. In order to move the items quickly up from bottom to top, usually what is done is that we have a column of observers facing into solid blocks, which are next to droppers, and then have some sort of chain of observers and something else alternating. And what will basically happen is that this chain going upwards will be triggered and will cause updates, of course, which these observers right here will detect. And all these droppers are going to get fired one after another. And just as an example, let's put one item in here. This is the bottommost dropper, and it will go all the way up top when we update this rail right here. As you can see, it ends up right here at the top, and that's basically just triggered this chain of observers and rails, which was detected by those observers, which of course pulsed these droppers. These observers go into solid blocks and not directly into the droppers, because if we were to have them directly facing into the droppers, it will activate neighboring droppers like this, and that would not make it silent or one-way tileable. And yeah, this design is one-way tileable, and it is completely silent. But the basic mechanic we are using to make this dropper elevator so simple is the fact that observers can detect whenever an item is pulled out or put into a chest. So basically this will detect whenever these hoppers pull out an item from the chest, and it will cause this entire chain to react, of course, and will get all the items from bottom right here to the top, and it does so completely perfectly. There is no skipping and all that, no items left out, and yeah, this is pretty good. However, one thing to note is that it is not always very consistent. The observer will not always fire at the same interval, and that might cause some issues if you have some specific circuits where you have a loop or something where you want an item waterfall. But honestly, in my opinion, it's not too much of an issue because those are pretty useless anyway. And yeah, this will work fine for things like multi-item sorters and all that sort of stuff. The second thing I want to go into detail is why we are using observers and rails on the backside here. You may see some designs that use torches instead of these rails, and there's a problem with that, and that's why I chose to use rails, and I will show you now. The problem with using redstone torches instead of rails is that they take longer to react. Torches take 2 redstone ticks to react instead of 1 redstone tick, so it means it will take 4 game ticks instead of 2 game ticks to react, and that effectively makes these elevators using torches instead of rails 75% the speed of just using the rails. This can be easily demonstrated by a setup like this. As you can see, when alternating between observer and rail, it will advance every 2 game ticks or 1 redstone tick as indicated by this repeater right here. And with this chain of observers and torches right here, it will advance every 4 game ticks or 2 redstone ticks with the torches, and every 2 game ticks or 1 redstone tick with the observers. We can easily demonstrate this by turning off this rail. It will fire all of these lines at once, and as you can see, those two will arrive first and then those two. It might not seem like much of a difference in speed, but on a larger scale you will definitely notice the difference, because this will be of course 75% of the speed of those two. And that is because averaging out between the 2 game ticks it takes for these ones, or the observers, and the 4 game ticks it takes for the torches, it averages out to 3 game ticks. Now, odd game tick delays don't really exist in Bedrock Edition because signals are locked to consumers and producer type components, but that's not really the point here. It will average out to 3 game ticks average speed, and this will average out to 2 game tick speed. So this is in fact 75% of the speed of that one. I have the same setup right here, showcasing which components will make the chain advance at 2 game ticks and which ones will make it advance at 3 game ticks. Of course, it's not really 3 game ticks like I just said, but it's just alternating between 4 game ticks and 2 game ticks. So the torches and the redstone dust will make it advance at, well, 4 game ticks, and all these other components will make it advance at 2 game ticks. I didn't put lamps because they have such a ridiculously high delay that it will fire twice and all that, and that's not good. But anyways, let's just try it out. As you can see, all those except the torch and the dust arrived at the same time. They advance every 2 game ticks, and those advance on average every 3 game ticks, and well, that is of course the problem. Those ones are much slower, and that's why we prefer to use these types of components for dropper elevators. Now, the reason why rails are preferred for these types of chains, notably the powered rails and the activator rails, is for 2 simple reasons. One, you can use these next to each other without them triggering the next. That makes it one wide tileable. And they are completely silent, and they are not that expensive. That's why we use those types of rails for the elevators. And of course they advance at a rate of 2 game ticks as opposed to 3 game ticks, which is not so good, and that's why I use these. Using a full observer chain, droppers, dispensers, belts, or hoppers also advances at 2 game ticks, but there are very obvious reasons why we prefer to use those. First of all, observers using a full observer chain is more expensive, of course, because you need quartz and a lot of cobble. I guess the cobble is not too expensive, but the quartz is. Then, of course, these droppers and the dispensers make a lot of noise, and that's why you would not use those. I don't know why anyone would swap rails for dispensers or droppers in a circuit. And well, of course, there's also the issue that this would not be one wide tileable, because this right here, when this gets powered, it would trigger neighboring droppers, and that of course would not be good. Same with the dispensers, and same with the bells as well. And of course, the bells are extremely loud, so you should never use those. And in addition, they can mess up villager stuff, so please don't use those. And just to demonstrate, when a bell is hard powered, so that means directly by an observer or something else, it will also power neighboring blocks. We can just demonstrate it by having a lamp. Let's just trigger that. As you can see, that bell also powered this lamp right here. This is a weird property of bells. They seem to be full in terms of transferring redstone signals. And as for the hoppers, they are technically one wide tileable and completely silent, and they also advance at a rate of 2 game ticks. But the problem with those is, of course, that hoppers are extremely expensive. Then just the torches and the redstone dust. These both advance at a rate of 3 game ticks on average, of course. And of course, there's the issue with the torches that they are simply not one wide tileable. They will connect and mess everything up, and that makes it not one wide tileable. And yeah, the torches are an okay option, but they are slower. I guess if you want to cheap out a little, you can use those because those are one wide tileable as well, but I wouldn't. I would honestly just use activator rails and powered rails because they're simply the best option. So let's take a look at this one more time. Results are that those are the fastest, those two are 75% the speed of the others, and you should use those two, which are the activator rails and the powered rails. I messed them up. That's the powered rail, that's the activator rail, and the reason is that they are the least expensive and the fastest, one wide tileable, and completely quiet compared to the other options, which all have some sort of downside, and they're not very expensive. Alright, I'm going to show you how to build one, and then I'm also going to show you how to tile those, because there's some things you need to know about that. So those are the materials for an elevator that goes 8 droppers up after this chest right here. If you want more height, then you're going to need to add more observers, more solid blocks, more rails, and more droppers. And you're also going to want to take into account that with each elevator that you add that is right next to it, you're going to want to alternate with activator rails instead of powered rails, so that they don't activate the neighboring rails, and that is very important to make it one wide tileable. So basically every time you add one, you alternate between powered rail and activator rail. And you add all the other materials, of course, but yeah. Before we start building this, I just want to demonstrate how directional rails are. So that's a problem rails have. They tend to connect to where you don't want them to. And let me just demonstrate what I mean. Oftentimes you just simply build a rail like this, and then you just want to make another rail line right next to it. Now the problem with that is that if rails have an edge that is completely left open, and you attempt to place a rail right here, they all just end up connecting like this, which you don't want, and that only happens in certain directions. So if the tips of the rails are facing north or south, which would be like this, and by the tips I mean the ends, then they will end up connecting like this, and that is a problem rails have. They are directional. But this can be remedied by doing the following. So if you want to have one that is exactly the same length as this one, you just want to temporarily extend the length, add this, and then remove the tips. And as you can see, they won't be connected, and that is how you tile rails, and that will be important for knowing how to build this dropper elevator. Alright, let's build it. So we're just going to start by making a block formation like this. This is pretty simple. Add one rail right here, add 3 rails right there. Then you're just going to have a solid block facing that. Place a observer facing this rail like this. One dropper right here. And have an observer like this, solid block, another dropper facing up, place a hopper facing into the bottom dropper, place a double chest like this, have an observer facing down, and of course observing the chest. And that is the basic simple circuit of the dropper elevator itself. Now of course you're probably going to want to extend this up a little further, so let's just do 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Just have some observers facing into the direction of the droppers, and have some solid blocks like this. And then you want to alternate between rails and observers, so just like this. And that will all be able to be detected. If you have the length at odd numbers, then you will always end up with an observer at the top. And if you have it at even numbers, so that is 9, that will be 8, you will end up with a rail at the very top. Now normally if you have this chest facing east or west, you shouldn't have any issues with tiling it, because those rails and those rails you want them to connect anyways, but those rails you don't want them to connect. So if you make it facing west or east, you shouldn't have any issues with tiling them, because well, those will not connect. But if you have, then let me show you how to fix it. So this dropper elevator is facing north or south with the chest, and as you can see, if we do attempt to just make it like this, the rails will connect, and that of course we do not want, because that would cause some issues. So before you do that, you are just going to want to do the following. You just put one block right there, extend it, and put one rail right there. Then you can just add your activator rails, and simply you remove that, and then you just build the rest of the elevator. Same if you want to expand it again, you expand it right here, add the blocks, add your other rails, and then you remove it. And that is how you prevent the directionality of connecting with the other neighboring rails if you have it facing north or south. So that is what these elevators should look like if they are properly tiled. These bottom ones should not be connected, they should all just be leaning towards that direction. And as you can see right there, they're not connected. However, where the chain is, it should be connected, but that is of course not a problem, because they will not activate one another, and down there it should be connected as well. So I'm just going to prove to you that these are in fact one wide tileable. I'm just going to put some items in there, And as you can see, only this one will activate. The rest will not activate at all. As you can see, only this middle one right here is activated. And well, that is completely won by Tileable. And if you have the container right here, it also is completely silent. So I think that is about it. That's all you have to see in terms of dropper elevator technology and how this one in particular works. So I hope you found this interesting or useful, and well, I think it's very important that people know how these things work, so that's why I include this kind of information. And that way, if you know the mechanics, you can also fix things for yourself, etc. I would like to thank you very much for watching. Make sure to subscribe because I have much more interesting content like this. And well, bye!